Okay. Hi, Chris. Good to see you. Good
Good to
morning.
see
How
you
are you?
too. I'm great. I
Good.
am Joe Noteless.
Per,
Ooh.
I hope you
we're
have good
note we're
questions.
note full.
All right, good.
Thanks.
Welcome back to Pedaling Squares, where we talk about all things endurance sports from a master's athlete's perspective. If you'll remember Michael Seiler and Holly Brenner from episode 13, we've brought them back, but instead of being the interviewees this morning, they are going to be the interviewers, and you all are stuck with me as the interviewee. I spared Michael and Holly the introduction, so I'm going to turn it over to my new interviewers on the podcast of Pedaling Squares Through a Mammal's Life. Good
Cool.
morning,
Good morning,
interviewers.
Chris. Yeah, we're looking forward to this. I think this is an intro. We were on, I guess it's been 5 or 6 weeks ago, and really was just an interview of us and our coaching style, etc. And to give everybody context for this call or this podcast was we pitched an idea to say, hey, why don't we do two 1 hour sessions of coaching, and then come back on and we'll talk to you about your experience. So you got to experience my style of coaching, which is the enlifted method, and then Holly's style, which is the International Coaching Federation method of coaching. So similar yet distinct in certain ways in the approach. So what we plan to do today, we've come up with some questions. We're just going to ping pong back and forth. And then certainly I'm sure follow-up questions will come up as we go along. So
I'm ready to be a guinea pig.
all right. I love it. Holly, you want to kick off with the first
So,
question?
yeah, excellent. Thanks for queuing up the intro. So, Chris, now that you've had a chance to speak with myself and Michael and have your own 1 hour coaching session with each of us, we're curious, what were your initial thoughts or impressions heading into the sessions?
So you want my thought processes going in, like what my preconceived
Yep.
notions were? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was well, let me say this. My set point would be I'm I'm going to talk about FTP and training volume and that sort of thing. And I knew you guys were probably going to take it from a different vantage point just because we'd spent an hour or two together. So I had in the back of my mind, like, I know this is going to be different, but I wasn't sure quite how.
Interesting.
Mhm. And I was curious in your thought process there because we often talk with clients that maybe haven't had coaching like this before. So everybody is starting the conversation coming from a different place. Maybe they've had athletic coaching, but not professional coaching.
Sure.
So was there anything that you were maybe, going to be paying particular attention to, or were you coming in totally open-minded, blank slate?
Yeah, well, I don't think you can ever come into something totally open-minded. But I did my
Mhm.
best to be, tabula rasa coming in, a little bit about my background, not to make it about me, but it informs the discussion. Is I've worked with cycling coaches, triathlon coaches in the past, and I've also, worked with sports psychologists, at a collegiate level and at kind of Olympic development level as a soccer player. So, I have that a little bit of bandwidth on how um, coaching is a heck of a lot more than uh, numbers on a page, spreadsheets, and periodization plans, especially for endurance athletes. And I guess I was coming into it with a little bit of a preconceived notion with regard to, in particular, what your method was, Holly, because I knew from listening to past podcast and having done some homework on you, I wasn't stalking. I was just getting ready for podcast. That you had a background in I don't want to call it mental health, but preparation for um, industry and performance within industry. You can recharacterize that more effectively than I can. And then I was literally like as close as I could get to tabula rasa with Michael because I only knew him by reputation, and it was a good one at that. So there was a little asymmetry in the expectations going in,
Cool.
just based on what I knew about the two of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, and there's definitely a fine line between preparation and stalking. I mean, it's
Yeah, for the record.
Yeah, it's really thin. So, and you probably tiptoed back and forth across that line. Yeah. So that's do you think going in, and this is kind of leading to the next question, which is really kind of your overall feeling post coaching sessions. As so really want to know what was your overall feeling after the sessions, and you could bifurcate that between Holly's session
Sure.
and your session with me, and then do you think going in with kind of a clean slate or just a mild or more open-mindedness was a benefit or a detriment to the session?
Oh, good questions. So I guess doing a post or a debrief, we'll call it a debrief. Let me kind of set the table a little bit about the importance of, from my perspective, the importance of coaching. It's twofold before that we get into kind of your methodology and my experience. The first is just accountability. It's like, you got to show up, right? And having somebody looking over your shoulder, even if they're not commenting on it, but they're there. There's a lot to that at a kind of a low level, psychological, motivational level. And I suspect that a lot of your athletes um, come to you with a history of performing well, meaning I'm not going to say they're at the upper echelon of their sports, but they're used to putting in the hard miles. Okay, so you don't have to do a lot of motivating, but there is something about knowing that there's accountability that's important to a coaching relationship. The second thing is the older I get, the more I realize, and it's reinforced, that I don't have the time, energy, or bandwidth to dig into the literature like I did when I was a younger man. And there's a huge trust factor in a relationship with a coach. When I think about it, it kind of goes in these terms. And this isn't pre-rehearsed, this is off the top of my head. Like I'm going to invest hundreds of hours in you, and you're going to invest oversight of hundreds of hours of my training. And then it's going to produce this product months, at best case scenario, weeks, months, and sometimes years down the line. And I've got to trust that you've got a method to your madness that I don't have. I gotta put in the efforts, but I gotta trust the model or the program or whatever term you want to plug into that. So coaching's like super duper important just from anybody that wants to get better. And then my last point on that is for folks that are coming to you with a level of performance, their gains are going to be incremental. I mean, we're celebrating 1, 2, 3, 5%. That's a good year. 5% gains, and then you can break it down and stratify it into different categories of performance. But anyways, so it's really important to have a coach going in for all those reasons. And I'm just kind of plugging the coaching industry for for those reasons. So I'm going to compare and contrast for the debrief side of it. I could go into Trainer Road and spend whatever it is, X number of dollars a month, and then they just kind of crap out a program, and you tell them I want to do a gravel race in June, or I want to April, and they give you a program and you stick with it, and you're your own accountability coach and that sort of thing. but they not, that those programs don't know you. They don't know kind of where, where you have strengths, where you have weaknesses as a cyclist or as a runner or as a swimmer, and they're not going to get tweaked. So you're dropping modest money into a multi-month, huge hour investment that's pre-programmed and has no oversight at all. Okay. And that to me is a guy who is, when I'm done doing the family stuff and I'm done working, I don't have too many hours left in the day. So I want to make sure those hours are best spent. Right. So you can either have somebody piloting that for you, or you can just get on autopilot and hope it works out on race day. Okay. So going in, and my point here is going in, I knew you guys could put a program together, period. Like I knew you had that skill set. What kind of really opened my eyes is how you just assumed that was going to happen. If we spent any time on it, we spent 1 to 5% of the time on those issues and spent 95% of the time um, between my ears. Okay. So, so what you're bringing to the table, and I'm being a little bit vague here. You can drill down with specific details to kind of tease out your coaching styles. I was surprised at how much of it was what's going on between my ears and how that's affecting motivation going into practice, or going to training sessions, and then obviously motivation on game day, which we talked generally about, but we didn't do any game day exercises in the sense that I had a game or a race coming up. Um, kind of comparing and contrasting. I was really encouraged in the intro that you guys adhere to two programs. And I want to kind of turn the tables just briefly here from an interviewee to an interviewer. So you're on the enlifted side, Michael. And
Hmm.
then how did you describe it? Was it international coaching? What?
Federation, ICF.
Better. Okay. And I'm sure you guys are certified through both of those. So I didn't realize until this podcast that there was an underlying method to your madness. I just thought you were two cats that had brought some life experience together and kind of, uh, I'm sure you've homegrown the margins on it, but homegrown to a philosophy that you have at Meta, because it is different. And I might even go out on a limb and use adjectives like profoundly different coaching approach, because you're zeroing in on what's going on between the ears. Um, I will say, Holly, your method required a lot of reflection going in and then kind of in meeting reflection. Um, and you can tease that out with follow-up questions. Michael, yours did too, but then you were like, hey man, we're gonna get really vulnerable here. And I was like, I'm sort of ready for that, but holy shit, like let's just dive right in. And we got into it, for good or for bad. Got into some, like, how did we get here and why are you motivated the way you are, from early childhood development stuff. And that really, we really, honest, we didn't get into early childhood development stuff. But my point is that then, and you can feel free to tease this out a little bit, it required a little bit of vulnerability on my part to work through some, anxious is an overused word these days, but some trigger points, and that's another one that's overused, but some points that required a little bit of attention because they're emotional. I guess I'll coin phrase here, they're kind of emotional flashpoints. So the commonality between the two approaches is that it was 95% or more between the ears. And the differentiating factor was, and this sounds a little bit vague, but I hope it makes sense, that Holly, there was a lot of reflection going in because I had to fill out paperwork going in, and you can tease out that much, as much of that as you want. And then, it was a more reflective exercise. Um, it got a little raw with Michael, because he kind of jumped right in and was like, "Hey, I see a nerve. Let's go after." There's some effectiveness in that because we're literally going through deep breathing exercises and kind of a psychological approach to dealing with stress that is produced either between the years, either in a training session or more pronounced in a racing situation. So that was a long answer. Go ahead and tease some more questions out of that.
No, that was a great answer, and your prelude was very helpful because, I mean, trust is such a big thing in a coaching relationship. You do have to have some faith and trust the process, trust the person. And I know going into our session, I mean, it was intense even for me. But what I appreciated the most was that you were willing to be vulnerable, to be open, because that's honestly the only way you're going to move past whatever has you stuck, whatever this thing is. Could be a race performance, could be something in your work life, your personal life. What the enlifted method that I'm certified in is really about dealing with these stories that are stuck in your head. And could be, I had this really crappy meeting with my boss and I need to deal with it before it becomes a thing. Or it could even be something back to, something that happened in college or even further back that you've just never really resolved. You've just pushed it over in the corner. And it's, this is where I think both our coaching approaches really help. One, provide you with new perspective on this thing through the reflection, through the discussion, but also start to just turn the volume down on that inner critic and just, instead of being an 11, it's, a 2 or 3. You hear it, but you've got tools to keep the volume down on that. I don't know if you had anything, Holly, you wanted to add or follow up with Chris.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for being so open and sharing with your audience your own experience and kind of really turning the tables here. I'm sure that your listeners are getting a chance to just learn more about you and connect with you, which is really powerful. And for Michael and I, we are certified in 2 different programs. And what drove our desire to get continuing education to be certified in specific skill sets was that we've been coaching athletes for, cumulatively, close to 2 decades. And we love it. And we recognize that our clients are more than just athletes. They're people, they're professionals, they're husbands, wives. There's lots of different identities that we all wear. And in order for us to best serve our clients, we really felt driven to serve them as people for who they are in totality, not just this one sliver of how they show up as an athlete. Because it makes sense, right? Like it's a top-down approach. So, Michael and I both started our programs early this year, and I can speak for myself. I mean, it's been transformative for me to be able to grow a skill set that allows me to really connect with my clients as they are for who they are beyond just athletes. Because how we coach, it's more than just the training plan, right? It's really understanding that inner dialogue, how our clients talk to themselves, who they're really showing up. Athletics, I don't want to say it's a symptom, like it's an output, but it's just part of the big picture. So by us being able to flex and learn this skill set, we're able to better help our clients. We're able to better help our athletes perform and show up, have more satisfaction, get more fulfillment out of life. I like to tell my clients that the outcome may not change, but if your satisfaction does, doesn't that matter? And everybody agrees that it does. And with the programming, yes, we stay on top of trends, we stay on top of being scientifically relevant. But now we're able to help people that are athletically driven or not. And that's really meaningful for Michael and I because we just absolutely love to coach. And I love it that we have 2 different modalities here. I picked one that spoke to me. Michael picked one that spoke to him. And by us being able to diversify our skill set, we just get stronger.
Yeah, and it is diversified, but in the same lane philosophically, if that makes sense. And I guess I'll put this out there. It's just a curiosity question when I'm picking the brains of folks that do between the ears performance for a living. You get into some cliches like it's about the journey, not the destination, that sort of thing. And the hook for a lot of type A's is if I get what's going on between my ears under control, I'll perform at a higher level. Like that's the I'm not saying that's your sales position, but that's the thought process is like, okay, if I can slay these demons, my FTP is gonna go up. and and that may or may not be the case, but I think about things now as a 50 something going on 51-year-old guy in terms of psychic energy. Like how much energy do I have for these rings in my life? And I want to spend time effectively in the training ring, not just when I say effectively, I mean effectively in a way that it fits into the rest of my life, not in a way that's just got a ring band around it. So to your point, Holly, about folks that are coming to training first time in their life, or they've hitting off a marathon is something that they want to do for a life goal. It's not about qualifying for Boston or um, qualifying for Kona or that type of thing. It's just I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go back to everything else that makes me a human being or everything else that's going on in the rest of my life. And so you guys are bringing something to the table that I literally don't see in the marketplace, and I'm in it from a coaching philosophy standpoint. And then, there's the whole, does it benefit you in industry or in other aspects of your life? And the answer is always yes, because that's why we put our kids in the sports, right?
Hmm.
That's where they're garnering some life lessons. Can tell you, now as a father of four, I I didn't understand sports until I watched my kids go through it. Like when you see them really maturing as young adults and learning really hard or really beneficial life lessons, it literally, for me, it didn't click until I was a father. Like for me, it was like, I'm going out on the soccer field and I'm going to perform at a high level and I'm going to reap the rewards of that. I'm going to feel good about myself. And it was like, how am I always going to be better when I cross that chalk line onto the pitch? And I never really thought about like what I was learning
Yeah.
along the way. Now that may speak to my lack of reflectivity as a person, that this stuff, these lessons are sinking in the rearview mirror or watching other people go through it. But I put it out there because there's something to each of your modalities that will bleed into other aspects of your clients' lives.
Yeah, there's a really cool exercise. Um, so it, what you and I went through is really like step one, which is just kind of getting the stories out of the head and on paper so you can get some perspective. And there's another step which we call celebrating the wins. And so you've dealt with the pain and suck and woe. And now, because you're right, it's so easy to get into a sport. And, I grew up playing soccer as well. And you just go and you play and you don't realize that you're learning things like how to be a good teammate, how to influence teammates, how to deal with losing, how
Yeah.
to deal with not playing well, how to deal with playing really well. And so part of celebrating wins is to help pull those things out as well to see, oh my gosh, in reflection, I see all these times I've exhibited this behavior, or I have done hard things, because we sometimes get through the hard thing
And it's
and
the next one.
and you
Yeah.
go on to the next one, and it's just how do you continue to show and put the spotlight on that learning, or the fact that you did this hard thing, and so here comes another hard thing. You can do this because look at all these other hard things that you did.
Yeah.
And that really speaks to our namesake of Metta, which
Yeah.
is loving kindness.
Yeah.
And that may sound soft, or, hippie, but it was really about cultivating a sense of inner kindness and appreciation for all that we've done, all that we haven't done, all, the places that we've been and we haven't been, what we are and what we aren't. And when we can see that in ourselves, we can extend that grace to other people. And through that practice and approach, our fulfillment increases. And again, like when we talk about being fulfilled, finding peace, finding joy, um, things that are a little bit more static than happiness,
Yeah.
that's radical and that's transformative.
Yeah. I kind of like the way you phrased that, because there is either a staticness or a baseline to joy, where happiness is like up and down, up and down, up and down.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when you're grounded in the process, it's easy to find joy. The happiness may be, a good workout, or a good race performance, but you recognize it as what it is. It's fleeting, and then you go
Hmm.
back to. Um, it, it, I've always embraced the suck as a personality profile, so I love training. I
Mhm.
do. It's just, I get a lot of fulfillment out of checking boxes, and maybe it's just my simpleton view of the world. But you go out there and you chop some wood, and then you rest, and then you go chop some more, and that's my personality profile. Um,
Mhm.
let me piece something out here that from a coaching philosophy perspective. So, when I think about folks at the very tops of their sports, and I could do a list of names, but I'll just focus on Michael Jordan because he's ubiquitous, and you watch documentaries on him, and he showed up and just coincidentally in my Instagram feed, and I was watching this little snippet about what a jerk he was, and how his teammates feared him as much as his adversaries. And that speaks to just this sheer act of will that he brought to the sport of basketball that elevated his performance, and elevated the performance of everyone around him. And it culminated in a lot of success. And do you find in your practices that I'm not going to ask you to pick favorites, but there's a personality profile that you see in your more successful athletes? And I'm not talking about like the polished, well-rounded athletes that you've been working on. I'm talking about, so I'm giving you the Michael Jordan example, and then um, I'll give you another example. Who's the guy that coached all the young female Olympians? Um, like
Nasser?
Nadia what's his name? He had the farm.
Yeah. Nasser? Oh, that was a
No,
US Olympic.
yeah, he was he
Um,
was he was
Oh, Bella Caroli.
Bella
that's right.
Caroli. Bella Caroli, famously in my mind, said he could identify Olympians at a very young age, just attitudinally. He could see it in these young ladies. They just had some fire in their belly. So I'm giving you kind of to set up the question, the Michael Jordan example, and then Belly Caroli saying, I think that might be one. I see something in her. Do you see a personality profile that is comes to the fore in some of your more successful athletes, or do you think that I'm giving you a singular route to success that is just that's all it is there's a route to success, and there's lots of other routes that you see I'm getting into routes. I'm just talking about kind of personality profiles. That
Mhm.
was a fumbling, mumbling question, but I think you know where I'm going.
Yeah. One of the things, um, I think from a getting started, I do think having uh, drive is probably overused, but something that, whether it's the inner fire or a true understanding of your why, um, something that gets you started and kind of keeps you going. Um, that gives you that gets you into whatever the sport is, and will serve you well when you do hit those periods of the work gets really hard because you're continuing to push yourself. I'm still thinking across the athletes we coach, and they're all so different, but I think that's probably the big thing, is that they come with some level of inner drive to improve themselves or to do some hard thing. That's where it starts, really, is that thing that gets them out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say, as a response to that, my definition of success is kind of irrelevant, not kind of, it is irrelevant. So like, what is success to that athlete? How do they define success? But if we're thinking of success on like a stage, like high performer, period,
Yeah.
like you had meant kind of teed up, I see curiosity as a personality trait, always being want to be curious and explore, kind of discover
Mm.
their potential. I also see, very driven, very consistent. Most of my high performers, I actually have to keep them from doing too much. That's
Yeah.
actually one of the hardest,
Mhm.
Reining them in.
kind of,
Yeah.
it's something that we work on together in our relationship, because I need to understand what their limits are. Oftentimes, my high performers tend to be more compulsive without knowing what they're doing. They're kind of just scratching that itch.
Yeah.
Um, and so my work is really, instead of telling them what to do, telling them what not to do, and why.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting how in some athletes, they need that motivation. They need to have that race on the calendar in order to
Yeah.
actually get things in gear, versus other individuals with other personality traits. It's really kind of holding them back.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And let me kind of build on that with, there's that aphorism out there. I think it's an aphorism. As the twig is bent, the tree will grow. And, we could, I don't want to get into a big long discussion about childhood experiences or development, but there's something, either they're born that way, or I kind of lean towards, like, there's some nurturing that needs to go on. But if you're performing at a very high level, it's like those traits just get you in the door, and then they get in your way.
Mhm.
And that's where the stuff between the ears becomes like super critical if all you're
Mhm.
trying to do is get better. And I'm not suggesting that's the only reason to get a coach. But to your point, Holly, about the reining in that personality profile or that athlete, it's like, you got to trust me and you got to trust this system. When I tell you it's a rest day, that, damn it, it's a rest day,
Yeah.
because you're not
Yeah.
you're
And
not you're not reaping the benefit of your gain.
right. And the nature versus nurture argument is very interesting. In the research that I've done and the mental health professionals that I tend to trust, the evidence is pretty clear that nurture will trump nature to a
Hmm.
point. So you have predispositions. You're predisposed to certain characteristics or traits. However, the nurture, the environment that you're in, is pivotal to really shaping what you do with that nature. The key here is that we kind of think of nature versus nurture as the first 18, 16 years of life, your parents' home, your family home. The key is that our environment is around us into
365.
early adulthood, into
Yeah.
adulthood, right? So like
Mhm.
the onus shifts from our parents creating that nature to us owning it and shaping
Mm,
it. And I think that's
yeah.
where coaching can really come in, is we're helping our athletes, our clients, create and sustain the mental environment so they can nurture themselves. Like a field, what are you cultivating? What are you growing?
Yeah.
It's malleable, and it's
Yeah.
the mental sets and reps. And that is critical to how we experience our world. Yes, we have genetic predispositions, we have traits and characteristics that are the roots, but how the roots of those, tenets, how they grow and flourish, that's the environment. We have control over that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I think about we all come across it at cocktail parties where somebody wants to blame their parents for whatever situation they're in their 40s and 50s. You're like, come on, pal. Like, take some ownership here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Take some ownership. Number one, your parent, nobody parents with a handbook, but it's, I didn't realize that the literature indicated like I've always mentally kind of picked 18 as the age. It's like, okay, turn 18, you can go fight for your country, you can drive a car. Um, you at that point in time, male or female, you've gotta take some ownership over your world outlook on it. And yeah, I never really thought about it in terms of creating my own environment. You know what I mean? Like it's like even the
Mhm.
events that
Because
happen
where do
post.
we live? We live between
Yeah,
here. I may be in, Allentown, Pennsylvania, but this is where I spend my time.
yeah,
This is what matters.
yeah,
We can
yeah. And
change
so,
here. This is our dialogue. Like Michael's work really focuses on words, our wordplay, and our inner story. That's here.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and you
yeah,
think about, I mean, having been in the corporate world as long as I have, I mean, so you've got adults, and there's good culture and there's bad culture.
tell me about
And
it.
um, so people thrive in a highly engaging culture. People don't thrive in a negative, bad culture. So the environment is still having an impact on performance, even though these are adults. Um, and bad cultures are sometimes just could be a combination of bad actors, could be people who just haven't had the good experiences to know, you know, how to be a good teammate, how to
Right.
get, influence their team. I mean, that's one of the things I ask. One of the things I ask when I get a new boss or when I'm working with, a team, or even just one of the things I want to know is like, oh, did you play sports growing up?
Yeah.
Just because that lets me know, is there some sort of baseline of, oh, you've been on a team, you understand what it's like to be on a team, that you got to commit to the team, et cetera. But kind of going back to the nurture thing, we were talking, I was reminded back when I was running a junior cycling program, and I'd have parents come up and say, "Wow, I want Johnny to. How can I get Johnny to, get better or faster?" And I usually would say, "You've done your job. You've gotten them here. Now just let them be,
Yeah.
because they're going to get around these other kids, and the competition starts to spark itself. They look at so and so who's doing a particular, especially in cross, who's doing really well getting over the barriers. Okay, what's Sally doing to get over those things so fast? I need to, watch Sally more." And so they learn about being leaders. They learn about learning from others. I mean, all these great tools, and it's like parents just go over there and talk with the other parents. Leave
Get
them
out of the
alone.
way.
They'll just get out of their way. You've done your job. You got them here.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a certain humility to parenting that's tough to come by.
But, well, I've been coaching Kate, and we have to play this little dance of
Yeah. Which
dad
hat are
versus
my,
coach.
which
Yeah,
hat is dad wearing right now?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, Curious to know, you mentioned insights that you gained through things that through your experience. I was like, in walking away, were there any kind of real like aha moments that you had?
Yeah. And it was probably the same type of aha moment after both sessions. And it speaks to this theme that we brought out, which is, you know, I can I can change, I can control, that's a loaded term for me. I could control um the environment I create for myself, meaning, and give me your thoughts on this. There's this age that I put out there, like 18, and then you go out in the world and you get kind of roughed up, and then you learn. um, I don't want to call them tricks and trades, but you learn a way to interface with the world and achieve success. And that will get you somewhere, right? And then you've got back to this theme of weighing energy. You've got to weigh how much energy you put into it. There's always that athlete that is the last one uh leaves cross practice or the lacrosse field or the soccer field or the football field or the basketball court, fill in the blank. And you just know that that kid is gonna always find a way to win or get out on the court or on the field because he or she has that um, desire to put in the time and the energy. And the reason I bring that up is I might have been that kid, but then you get a little bit older and you run out of time after practice, and you've got to figure out a better way to move forward because just pouring hours into a discipline, um, especially in endurance sports, that's a dangerous approach to things. But there's also a mental side to that is not just putting in the hours physically. It's like I'll just outwork everybody. And then you say to yourself, well, maybe there's a way I can work more effectively within the hours that I'm allotted for this task. And that was the insight. It was like there's something here that will help me more effectively train, and then that'll result in better results. And the truth is, I care about my results, but I don't really care about them like I used to, because at the end of the day, not even my wife cares, just me. So, as far as goal setting goes, I got to keep that in mind. But the insight or the takeaway to kind of narrow it down into a sentence or two is that there are modalities or methodologies to how we approach the mental energy that we put into this. I'm not even going to get into periodization and the science of it, although that's super fun to talk about. It's, now that we've set the plan or set the table, how am I going to approach each training session? And I got to be honest with the two of you, like, holy cow, I was out on a ride with my buddy Nate not even a week ago, and I could hear the critic starting on a climb. Like, here's the
What was
language that
saying?
you're um you know what, it goes back to it was saying that you know you're not going to go down like a deck of house of cards here. Like he was playing the lots, and it was like, okay, are we just going up the side of this climb, or is there, where's the axle? How many inches is it away from my front axle? Is he halfway on me, or is it? So, the language started coming in like, you're not going to go down. You're not going to go down. And it's like, what, Chris, why are you talking to yourself this way? Like, it's so negative. Like and there's something to reframing that and retraining that, I call them angels and devils, but retraining the language that you use to talk to yourself in
Mhm.
high intensity moments. And let me illustrate it physically, and then you guys can talk about it from a mental approach. I had a really hard time, as in I couldn't do it, changing my stride. I was a heel striker. Um, I wasn't getting it a lot faster, and I wanted to lean forward into my running and not necessarily be a toe striker, but be, less of a heel striker. And I could do it at 7.5 minute miles. I could do it at 7:15. And then as soon as I'd come under 7 and get into the, anywhere between a 5.5 or a 6 minute mile, it was the old Chris. I could not get the muscle memory to adapt. And I just shrugged my shoulders and said, okay, that didn't work. But mentally, I think I'm drawing that analogy because at that 5.5 minute mile to 6 minute mile, the way you talk to yourself when you're trying to put in that kind of effort is much different than the way you talk to
Mhm.
yourself at 7.5 to 8.5 minute miles. Do you understand where I'm going with this?
Yep.
And the task is developing the mental memory to talk to yourself differently in those really high intensity moments where like every atom of your body is saying, oh, let's take a break.
Yeah.
That's the insight, is learning the language and then having in the long term, the discipline to use it.
That's a great example, especially the one on the climb. And because I think Holly and I would agree that, I mean, the first step is just being able to recognize the critic.
Yeah.
Often the story's just going and we're just listening to it.
Yeah.
We're just, it's like we're watching a movie and we don't
Or
do
you're
anything.
latching onto it because it's brought success to
Yeah,
you.
you're like, oh yeah, I am a piece of crap, or yeah, I am going to fold like a deck of cards. So step one is being able to recognize all those little inner critics, whether it's when you're at work, when you're working out, when you're in your personal life. That's step one. Then step two is developing the skills and the tools to, again, turn the volume down. How do I say, enough of you, I'm not listening to you today, and I'm going to do this thing, or I'm going to get up this hill.
Yeah, and I think about the reason I was asking you those questions about kind of the inner drive of kids or the inner drive of athletes is I think that doesn't go anywhere. It's just who you are. It's a set point from a personality diagnostic profile if you were to kind of have somebody analyze it. And then you say, well, okay, that's just who I am. I enjoy life being I enjoy events that involve falling on those skill sets. And then you got to say, well, then do you want to have fun doing it, or do you want to make yourself miserable? It's not a complicated question, right?
Yeah, it's not that. It was funny. One of the upsides of going to track nationals is we were a mile from Holly's house, so we went out. She went out and beat me up on a long run. But one of the things we talked about was that people hold on to that inner critic. Like it becomes like, oh, no, this is my fire. This is the thing that gives me my juice. No, I can't get rid of this thing. And our argument would be, you still need to turn the volume down and find a more healthy way to stoke the fire. And often, in the enlifted method, it's about just changing the words that you're using. We change your words, change your world, or better words, better stories. It's just, changing, moving from pressure language, words like should, need, have to I get to. I mean, even these subtle language changes just totally reframe what your critic might be saying to you and turn it into a healthier way to deal with it.
Yeah, I suspect.
People like to say people like to
go ahead.
say demons in the closet. What if you open up the closet and nothing's there? Like we just assume that it's something negative. And in a lot of in my own personal work that I've done for my own self-development, I thought the inner critic was what gave me my edge.
Yeah.
I was like, I need it because without it, who am I? It is so entwined with who I am. And I was wrong. I thought it was an inner critic. When you open up the closet door and there's a mirror and all you do is see a reflection of yourself, then everything changes. And, that's not to say if you resolve your inner critic that you're going to lose your edge, that you're going to, perform differently. That's the inner critic telling you lies.
Yeah.
We have the power through mental sets and reps, change our words, change our stories, change how we show up. And, Michael and I would argue that performance benefits when we start to really develop a more positive affect for ourselves. It's less energy.
You just put your finger on at least how I'm currently looking at it. It's less energy. Like when you look at, I'm always just jealous and amazed at the same time when you watch like these old NFL films and you see like a big playoff game or the Super Bowl and Joe Montana's out there or Tom Brady and they're smiling. Smiling. And I don't mean like wry smile and like hey, we're winning. I mean they're smiling. It's like guy's in the biggest game of his career and he's having a great time. Like why not have a great time in your sport? But but your inner critic would say, that guy's soft. He's a smiler.
Mhm.
Smilers are soft.
Yeah, yeah.
He's got a lot of rings.
Well,
Right,
well, and even in
exactly.
the work context, it's what I think about when I see that in players in sport is that feeling of being having full command of your powers. And you don't have to have that feeling. You don't have to be Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady, but that feeling sometimes at work, you've probably experienced this in the courtroom where you just full command of your stuff. And if you were to think back or could step back, you go, wow, that was fun. Like to be
Yeah.
able to just, move it. I know that, in out biking, you go and you do get up a big climb and you're like, wow, that was a pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't have show notes, but I was thinking about this because the two of you come at sport from two totally different perspectives, and you just illustrated it. So, Holly, super high performer. Um, you knew, and you can get into your backstory if you want, but you knew that you had a big engine, period. End of story. You can be all humble about it, but there's a point where you're like, big engine. I'm going to go see what this thing can do, right? And then Michael and I come from a sports background. Okay. So to talk about your courtroom experience, so there have been times where it's like an out of body experience where I can feel like it's flow state, to put a
Mm-hmm.
name to it. But like I am it's like I'm watching myself perform, but I'm processing all the information that comes in. You've got to do that in a courtroom. Like there's so many things you got to keep track of, like down to like how eyes are being, reflected back to you from a judge or a jury or a
Sure.
witness, and when you're getting under their skin, it's just such a multifactorial thing that's going on. And I'll get off this in a second. But there have been moments where, and I remember them, where it's like I'm watching myself perform. I'm next to myself and going, yeah, that went pretty well. Scored a point there, Chris. And that I'm not going to say anymore that I live for those moments because I'm getting old and tired, but that there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction that's going on. And I would love to be able to like do a blood sample and figure out exactly what hormones are forcing and at what levels. Just academically, it'd be interesting. Okay.
Mhm.
So if I'm good at that, it might be because, I came to soccer from a perspective that I can be very, very good at a lot of things, but I'm probably not going to be great at any one of them. So if I can be good at a lot of things, I can have success in the sport. That lends itself to the practice a lot. Then I go out and I ride my bike, and I'm like, I know my engine's only so big. And I don't use that as an excuse, but I've been at it long enough that I have some idea of how well I can perform in a time trial, how well I can perform on a climb that's 5 minutes long, how well I can perform on a climb that's 10 minutes long, how, on and on and on. And I derive a lot of satisfaction at the end of a hard climb that, hey, that, that went well. Those were good watts, good heart rate, and I feel really good about that. And I just get satisfaction from that, period. End of story. So those are two different ways to approach life that require two different skill sets and a set of strengths, plural, in the soccer context, practice law context. But when you go into endurance sports, and you can really frustrate yourself, knowing that you can only be so fast. And I don't mean to be, you know, glib about it, but there's that dimension to being an endurance athlete. Am I wrong?
No, I mean, again, it's like, what's the definition of success?
Yeah.
Is it just a power output? Is it just a pace? Is it just a speed? Is it just a place? I
It's
think
better than I
that,
was yesterday. That's the satisfaction.
well,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's important to define and clarify what success is for you as an individual. And that definition can and probably should change over time so that we can stay fulfilled, stay rational, right? Stay grounded, stay realistic, and also be able to work with ourselves as we are and feel fulfilled. We can mourn the person that we used to be 20 years ago and appreciate exactly where we are now.
Yeah.
Both things can happen at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I think maintaining that fluidity, and there's this whole neuroscience. I've shared it with Andrew Huberman, goes into this ability to zoom in and zoom out, and it's a really important skill to develop. And he has on one of his podcasts an actual exercise on how to train your brain to do that. But sometimes that's how you can get the satisfaction, is to zoom in on, I did really well on that climb, and that makes me feel good. And then sometimes you need to zoom out and, look at the broader landscape. You
plug it into the rest of your life.
Well, for example, if you're struggling on a climb, if you zoom in and say, wow, I'm really struggling, you struggle even more. But if you zoom out and you're like, oh, this is just one part of the ride, I'll be fine once I get over it, and just got to get past this rough patch.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So but that's also about what is success. And so if you can also have some micro and macro definitions of success and be able to be flexible and fluid between those as you go along, just will help you perform better, but also keep that inner critic at bay.
He can get loud.
Yeah.
Or she.
And I was curious. So, Michael and I, we've maintained complete confidentiality with our conversations that we've had with you. So I know we were both really looking forward to this conversation because you're, special snowflake for us, because we haven't had a client that we've both coached. So we've been really interested in seeing, like, could this work? Is this beneficial? We don't know. So we'd like to ask you, how did our styles complement one another? Did they go together? And kind of what's your takeaway from being coached with both of our styles?
Ooh, that's a good question. I was thinking about that issue after working with both of you. And the answer is yes. The short answer. Because I think, if you were to do concentric circles, your coaching modalities probably overlap in the 60 to 80% category, not knowing anything about them, just getting a sense of your approaches. I'm not foreseeing a scenario. By the way, I've never been called a snowflake before. Thank you for that.
Sorry about that.
I did take it as a compliment. That there would be no reason not to do it. Like, there's no friction points in the coaching philosophies. There's no reason not to do it. The question is, like, how do they overlap and complement each other? I think is the underlying question.
Mhm.
And I would maybe taking a flyer here because we have 2 hours in. After 12, I might have a better answer. The your approach, and this sounds a little bit vague, is very reflective. It's like, we're gonna have a conversation about what makes you tick, and for whatever reason, because he's a masochist, Michael likes to, like, find the nerve and irritate it, and then test your reaction during it. And in that regard, there is a lot of complementary approach, because I don't want to overgeneralize your approaches, but there's framework conversations and then there's exercises, if that makes sense. And again, I don't want to over characterize, but my sense was that we're doing a lot of framework work on the Holly side and a lot of um, nuts and bolts work on the Michael side. Does that make sense? Or would be consistent with your modalities? I keep calling them modalities, your coaching philosophies. See, I don't want to overgeneralize the approaches, because there's so much that they overlap, that to concentrate on where I'm putting my finger on would make them seem like they're different when they're not. They're more complementary. And I'm guessing I'm going to do a lot of, if I worked with Holly, a lot of how do you talk to yourself kind of conversations. And then on the other side with Michael, it would be like, oh, how does this exercise fit in with the framework that we're building?
Yeah, um, I think that's an accurate description. I mean, one of the things about the enlisted method is, when we go through the certification classes, they jokingly say, you got to go in there and get the gnarliest story. And that's the one you got to deal with first. Because that's the one that's got people stuck. And so it is, I mean, as you experienced, we found some nerves and I said, all right, we're going in.
Yeah.
And
I didn't like it.
No, you did great. You did great. And you were very open and I appreciated that. But until you kind of get through that, you can't get to the really good stuff around celebrating wins and start doing goal setting, because those things will continue to haunt you or hold you back until we can just deal with them by turning down the volume of them and helping you learn how to deal with it. So it's definitely more of a, we're getting in there right out of the gate, is step one. And so it's different, but again, it's, of a thing in that we're still operating in the same lane. It's just a slightly different way of getting to the same thing.
Yeah. And I would say I do definitely kind of architect sessions so that they're progressive. I love giving homework.
Yeah.
I love just kind of understanding where the client is and then creating a path over a series of conversations that can really draw at that goal, whatever it is, that ultimate outcome that the client wants. Um, but yeah, I think, knowing a little bit about the enlifted style, they're very complementary. And, our clients might be more drawn to one than the other, just like our athletes are drawn to, either Michael and I as for coaching, depending
Yeah.
on what they're looking for. So
Yeah.
I think it's ultimately advantageous for us to be able to ascribe both. But it's great to hear your experience as somebody who has had both modalities, that there is such an overlap and that they are so complementary, because that was just great feedback. It's good to hear.
Oh, good. Good. All right. Let's press pause just for a second.
Sure.
I'm going to edit it right here because,
Happen.
right. All right. Pause over. Um, as far as, the complementary approaches, do you allow your clients to self-select as far as once they're in the door, or is it more typically you bring a client in because you have a relationship with them or somebody reaches out to you and then the two of you bounce ideas after the fact about athletes?
Typically, I mean, up to now, it's typically people know me, or they know Holly. And so and really during that discovery call, which we both do with prospective athletes, is, we're learning, can we work together?
Yeah.
And there is some self-reflection, of like, do I believe I can help this person? But on the plus side is that whether they're working with me, whether they're working with Holly, is that I always tell people, like, you're actually getting two coaches, because there are times where
Right.
this was a couple of weeks ago. Holly said, hey, I want to talk about this athlete that I'm working with. Just need, someone else, a different perspective of what's going on. And so that's been really powerful for us to have access to each other, and the fact that we do come from different sports, but also just different ideas, and having someone that can look and go, oh, have you thought of this? Have you ever tried this? Is super helpful. But we can certainly envision a day, and especially as it comes to professional coaching, that there will be people that would be more suitable. Like someone could come to me and I'd say, I think you'd be better served working with Holly for whatever reason.
Now, the reason I phrase the question that way is I don't want, this podcast to people to self-select one or the other. Because my thinking on it is, quite frankly, is I would be in good hands with either one of you, like literally like either or scenario. I mean, I don't want folks to be like, I don't relate to Chris in any way, so I wouldn't want to be coached the way he thinks he wants to be coached versus, whatever they're teasing out of this dialogue that they think they would land better with one or the other of you. I think two of you are in this situation to say, this guy or gal's got to be in your camp or my camp for the following reasons, because they are slightly different approaches, and there is kind of nuance to it, and a lot of that is on the intake side, like getting to know the athlete and how what makes them tick. We all like to think that we're individuals and that we've climbed this mountain on our own merit, and it's like, I don't know about that one, Chris. I think there's more similarities to people that have had success in their lives, in the way they go about doing it. And the idea that you got a corner on that market is a bit of an act of hubris. And to be able to say to yourself, well, I kind of fall into these patterns and they're helping me and they're hurting me. And, how do we, how do we move it more on the help side than the hurt side? And that's where the two of you bring an expertise into kind of looking at the person or the athlete.
Yeah. Well, and this wasn't part of your original question, but that's also an important part of when an athlete's meeting with us. I mean, I want them to be asking those questions like, can I work with this guy? Like, I mean, it's not I need a coach, here's one. Because going back to your original 2 points around coaching, I mean, one, yes, our job is to be that accountability partner, to help you set goals, help you set you on a path, build a plan, an action plan, and be there to, once you've been set in motion, be there to make adjustments, provide feedback, whatever's needed in the situation. And then the second one is really that trust factor, to trust that the process and the path we've got you going down is the right one. And so if you're meeting with a coach, I encourage people, like, don't just talk to me. I may not be the person for you. I can tell you, here's my approach. Here's how I work with athletes. I can give you, I'm happy to have you talk to any of the athletes I've worked with. But it should truly be an interview.
Yeah. Yeah. Finding a lawyer is very similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
I take a pass on because I can tell right out of the gates that we're not gonna mess.
Well, you think of like in team sports, and you're in high school or in college, the coach is the coach. You don't pick the coach. Coaches.
Yeah.
I mean, the only way you pick this coach is you just say, I'm not going to go to that school.
Right. Right.
So, it is important when you're to interview coaches and to say, these are the things I need. Are these things you do? Tell me more about how you work with people.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I like to work with Michael, because I'm totally 100% confident that no matter if an athlete comes to me or goes to Michael, that they're going to be getting a great coaching experience, period. Our styles and modalities do not need to be identical to be beneficial to serve our clients. I love it that we have different schools of thoughts. Like we're two different people and we have no intention to be 100% analogous. And that allows us to serve different people in unique and different ways as they are. And Michael has a high degree of standard. I have very hard standards for myself, and I don't always enjoy working with anybody, right? Or everybody, because I need to make sure that they're bringing a certain quality. And that's why I like working with Michael, because I know that he's going to serve his clients to the very best of his ability and make radical changes for the people that he serves. And that's why we work together very well as partners, because I don't have to worry about his quality.
Yeah. And if you were to both come at it from the exact same school of thought, it's like, well, then you're just getting the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I co-counsel cases all the time. And there's one lawyer in town that I do a fair amount of work with, and there are certain aspects of the way he practices that complement me and I complement him. And it's usually where he's strong, I'm weak, and where he's weak, I'm strong, and the
Yeah.
client ends up better off for it.
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think thinking back now, we're actually just past our 1 year mark of Meta. And I think back to that original conversation when Holly was pitching the idea. And I mean, I thought maybe for 7 seconds about it, because I knew that we were A, complementary, B, had different strengths and weaknesses. And I also knew that she was going to push me to be a better coach. And I think we've been able to push each other to elevate our game, which just in the long run benefits, the people we work with.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. Anything else from my
So curious for
when you got the
you.
hood up?
Oh,
Yeah.
so Chris, who do you think our style of coaching could be beneficial for? Like just athletes or professionals? You had kind of mentioned that you don't see this style of coaching
Oh,
in the
yeah.
marketplace. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering if you could just kind of lean into that a little bit more because, we are always curious in hearing from our clients to know like what types of people would work best with us.
Yeah. Um, I think you're going to have a high level of, your point earlier, curiosity about the process. Curiosity and open-mindedness, just as far as personality traits. In maybe by definition, ruling out a lot of people on the bell curve. I'm being facetious. Because a lot of people come to coaching, and this is not a criticism, and I don't want this to come from a place of like I'm looking down on anybody that looks at it this way, but they look at coaching as I want to get better. They've got the secrets. I'm going to pay them for the secrets. I'm going to get better. And 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 the secret could mean anything. It could be, they know more about periodization than I do. They have raced bigger races than I have. They've performed at higher levels than I have. So I want them to pull me up to their, standard. Um, but it's not that isn't it. I mean, that's kind of not it with, you know what? Let me back up. There, so working with young people is a lot different than working with old people because they have less baggage. Okay. I could see a young athlete plugging in very well. Okay. So if a parent's listening or a parent wants, sees a kid that they just want to get to the next level, whatever that is for that child. And boy, that could be a podcast, coaching kids, parenting kids that are being coached, but that's a conversation for another day. Um, I could see plugging a kid into your program, and they, in a lot of ways, they'd be almost better off setting them on a course for life, learning some of these higher end skill sets on handling stress, and then getting a coaching benefit from it because you're going to put them on the right program, right? So kids would be kids. By kids, I mean 12 to 18, 20. You're still a kid at 20. That profile would fit in, but they'd fit in for different reasons, okay, than adults. So like the bell curves like this for kids. When you're talking about adult clients, if you're just coming at it from I want to coach and I want the secrets, it would work, but I think you would find the other side of that relationship unedifying. It would just be like, keep telling me what to do. And that personality profile probably would not fit well within that. As you get older, you have to have a curiosity about the process and a humility and a willingness to say, I had a lot of success so far. Maybe I want to try it a little bit differently. And that can be a daunting um, chasm to to jump over for an adult because we get set in these success patterns and we don't we're afraid that if, to your point about the demon, if you don't let the demon define you, um, you're not going to be successful anymore. And so you have to have a curiosity, humility, and a willingness to say, I'm going to try something different for a period of time. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you've got to come in it with those character traits and then, commit a chunk of time. Now that you can negotiate what that chunk of time is, whether it means 3 months, 6 months, or a year. Um, yeah, that you're going to have to overcome the lack of those character traits in some adults. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah, it does. And I have seen in my coaching, and this even goes out, in the corporate clients I work with at work, there is a readiness component to working with a coach. And I do think kids, because their minds are just still developing, they're kind of open to whatever, there's a little more, they're much more just being.
Yeah.
There's some other things you have to deal with in coaching with juniors. Their communication skills aren't great. Most kids don't have a good mind-body connection. So we're spending a lot of time, how do we develop that skill?
Yeah.
But you're right that as you get to more adults and older adults, they need to be open and they need to be ready to do that. And I've had conversations where, someone comes to me and I'm like, I've said, this just isn't working out. I don't know that coaching is the right thing for you right now.
Yeah.
Not an ever, but just right now with all this going on, I think you would be better served to just do your thing and come back when the situation changes, you're more open, more curious, whatever is kind of holding them back from really what you're describing is the coaching relationships where the person I'm working with has been more successful. They've leaned in. They're not just,
Yeah.
I want to pay for your secrets and I'm going to be successful. They have to lean in and be engaged. That part of my job is to help create an atmosphere that we have trust. They feel comfortable leaning in and being vulnerable and being curious and all that stuff. But both Holly and I think coaching is for everybody, but if there is a readiness, a timing, the right time to be coached.
And I think how you may have asked an even broader question than you intended to. I can see this working in industry. This isn't just for what you're doing, isn't just for athletes. Now, having said that, I think having a hobby as far as endurance sports go, it gives you a safe place or an environment to test the theories out and then let them carry over into industry. If depending on how you make your money, there may not be a lot of opportunity to um, exercise the skill sets in an environment where the consequences aren't your pocketbook. If that makes sense.
Yes.
It's yeah. Like I don't make a living riding my bike, but I I'm a better attorney for having ridden my bike.
Yeah, that's why I love sports because it is that
Yeah.
safe space. Like you can fail in a bike race, on a running race, and keep your job, right?
Right.
But you don't
Right.
necessarily want to step up to bat and take swings at your job as a working professional. So I believe, and I know Michael can say the same thing, that the lessons we learn through sport help us in every other aspect of life.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that sport should be something to be treasured and cultivated through life because it's overcoming fear, it's that self-doubt, it's that challenge, it's that
Yeah.
discomfort. It's making time for it. Of course, there's the healthy benefits, right? Of, who cares what the outcomes are, just simply engaging in meaningful movement makes you a healthier human, which allows
Yeah.
you then to show up for your kids, for your family, for work. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really important uh, environment to get sets and reps to practice in. But, we do coach executives or professionals, working professionals that don't just come to us from an athletic background. And the lessons still apply. It's still
Mhm.
Oh, for sure.
beneficial, right? Because we're all
Yeah.
humans having a human experience. No one gets out. So we all have dialogues. Some people we can relate to through an athletic lens, but other people, they want to have more performance at work, more fulfillment at work. Maybe they need to make a change, or they're curious about maybe if their current position is for them or not.
Hmm.
That's a coaching conversation.
Yeah.
And we've had great benefits in working with, our athletes, our client athletes, as well as our athletes that are clients and working professionals, which is most of them, as
Yeah.
well as just professionals. And that's been a big kind of use case for us because we came from an athletic lens. So it's kind of our working process so far is how can we keep that athletic lens that's worked so well and help coach people that aren't just athletes.
Right. Right. And the bones and the musculature are there to just drop it into, to industry. And at the risk of having like a Joe Rogan moment, um, I think it's so important to have some variety of sport in your life because it all it's doing is if it does one thing, it's reinforcing toughness. It's that resiliency stuff that's
Mhm.
90% of life, it's 90% of your job, it's 90% of forming as an athlete. It's just uh, the muscle and mental memory of getting up and doing hard things and overcoming them,
Yep.
right? That's it.
Yep.
I've stopped calling races races. I've started calling them projects. It's a mental
Yeah.
sea change for me. They're just projects. They're just something I take off the shelf to prepare for, and then I put it back on the shelf, and then I get on with the rest of my life. And I try to keep the race anxiety on the shelf because it'll bleed into and sometimes ruin the rest of my life. And part of having a coach or part of kind of putting sport in its place is learning the ability to um, compartmentalize.
Yeah.
That's a skill.
Absolutely.
Enduring a lot of pain during a ride or a run is a form of compartmentalization, but then you take it over into the rest of your life, and that's a learned skill. Period.
Oh,
End of story.
that's absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people have asked me my biggest takeaway from doing a couple of Ironman, and I think it was building the ability to compartmentalize and to say, so you're talking about the zoom in, zoom out. If you zoom out and you think about the entirety of this is going to be an 11, 12-hour day, um, it becomes overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so what you have to quickly learn is to zoom in and say, I am swimming now. I'm not thinking about the bike that's next. Definitely
It's
not thinking about the run. I am swimming. And even getting zoom in, I am swimming to that buoy.
yeah.
Now I've passed that buoy. I'm swimming to the next buoy. And then once the swim's done, I am biking. And that's one of the, I mean, that ability to focus is through sport, the ability to just turn all the other noise off, focus, because it's going to serve you in work. It's going to serve you in your personal life. I mean, it just serves a lot of places.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess when I think about being in industry, or I call that having a job, but it's just a fancy way of saying it. Yeah, if that's all you're doing is trying to coach your way through being a better fill in the blank person at work, whatever your title is, I don't know. I don't know. That's like an 8 or 10 hour proposition where being a absent leadership roles. I could circle back to that, but being an athlete, that's something you gotta your entire day rotates around it in a positive
Mm-hmm.
way, right? It
Mm-hmm.
forces balance all the way through your life. And the reason I caveated it a little bit is, some leaders they never get to turn it off. just because of the level of responsibility they have within their organization. So that, that does feel like an Iron Man for those guys and gals, because they never ever like literally don't take a day off. So they're kind of levels of analysis. I was kind of looking at most of the people when I talk about how it transfers and the need for having a sport in your life. But yeah, I mean, I see the same skill sets, uh, the same benefits, not the same skill, the
Yeah.
same benefits from the skill sets in industry is just as much as in sport.
Cool. Well, no, I could keep going.
We're in an hour and a half. You got me all morning if you want to do any follow up. I don't know if we've checked it. I don't know if you've checked off every question you had.
No, we actually have. I know from my perspective, and I'll let Holly speak her perspective as well. But one, thank you. It turned out exactly like I was hoping it was going to turn out. When Holly and I were like, let's pitch this thing to Chris, I was like, I think this would be really good. And then after we, I think talked more, I was like, yeah, this is going to be good. But one, thanks for letting us hijack your podcast. Thank you for the open and honest conversation. This has been great. And definitely thank you for the feedback you've given us, because we've got some stuff. You just gave us a gift of how we can think about how we approach our coaching as well.
I'm happy to do it. You got a good thing going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That means a lot. I mean, we think so, but just making impact into people's lives, helping them find that fulfillment and being more meta, cultivating that sense of loving kindness. And it's just like our logo too, the Karen, how can we have sustainability? How can we stack, seemingly juxtapose things on top of each other to find balance in a way that lets us be more of us, so that we can share our gifts with those around us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And I
thank
sense
you.
that, you're welcome. And I sense that you not only do you have a good thing going, but this is from the outside looking in, you're not trying too hard. And what I mean by that is there isn't a kind of a marketing sheen to the approach that you're taking that you see in other avenues. You're kind of you're kind of a resource that people are lucky if they find you. It's just a question of getting you out there. And if you may be a victim of your own good work, and you get overloaded and you have to hire another coach and all that stuff that goes with being successful. But you do seem to have a good formula, and a formula that's going to works for endurance athletes, which is what this podcast is about.
Thank you. Michael is our marketing department. If anything gets posted on Instagram, it's because he posted it on Instagram. I'm just so bad at that. I always call myself out. But I mean, this is organic growth, I think we have a collective ideas about what we'd like to see in our future, and we're not white knuckling that, right?
Yeah.
We are taking a kind of non-attachment approach. We're just really focusing on doing what we do to the best of our ability with the people that we work with, getting in our own sets and reps, continuing to strengthen each other, strengthening our skill sets, and kind of trusting that if we're making the impact, success to us is the number of people we can positively inform and positively impact. And if we focus on that, we'll find success.
Yeah, it will come your way.
Yeah.
There is something to the organic growth approach. If you actually have a marketing plan, it's like, I understand why you got to do it, but it takes a little bit of the fun out of the actual doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's something to work on. I need to put that on my goals.
Right. All right. Well, terrific. Well, on that note, we'll no, not on that note. Remind people where to find you on the interwebs and on the social medias.
Sure. They can find us mostly on Instagram, although we do post on Facebook, at Metta Endurance. You can also find us on the World Wide Web, mettaendurance.com. Those are the two best places to get a hold of us. Either direct message, or we have a contact form on our website as well.
Perfect. All right, guys. You take care. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. Same to you. Have a great weekend.